Asia Celestino, and you're watching BeBelieveTV. Today we have a fantastic guest on the show, Dr. Richard Laub, and following his service in the Marine Corps, he received his PhD from the University of Hawaii. He later founded Laub BioChemicals Corporation in Newport Beach, California. Today, he is one of the most prominent pioneers of the health benefits for humic acid. Thank you so much for joining our show. How are you?
Yeah, it's very good. Thank you. My pleasure.
So let's talk about your path to the biochemical industry. How did you get started?
Well, my bachelor's degree is in chemistry. Following the Marine Corps, I went to school at UCLA doing my PhD, but then my research director moved to the University of Hawaii. So that's where I finally got my PhD. And following that, I taught chemistry in Britain, University College Swansea. I was a Science Research Council Fellow for 4 years there, and then moved to Ohio State University, and after several years there, moved to San Diego State University, where I taught chemistry for 10 or so more years. But then finally, I branched out on my own and began Laub BioChemicals Corporation in the fall of 1995. And I've been researching humic acid ever since that time.
Let's talk about Laub BioChemicals Corporation. What encouraged you to incorporate and go off on your own?
Well, in the very early days of the corporation, in fact, even prior to forming a corporation, I, together with several other people, were researching humic acid, and what we found was that, in fact, it's a very good broad-spectrum antiviral. And as a chemist, it was also very interesting material from its physical-chemical properties. So I began Laub BioChemicals Corporation to continue the research and development of humic acid.
And what kind of lesson do you think that teaches entrepreneurs? Because I've read about your research within your team, and when it fell through, it really pushed you to go off on your own. Do you think that is kind of a lesson that rings true for a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners in this day and age?
Oh, I think so. To be a successful entrepreneur, and it really doesn't guarantee success at all, but the very first thing you have to start with is a real passion for what you're doing. Because I'm sure for most entrepreneurs, as was my case as well, there are some very lean, tough times, particularly in the early days of a company. And having that spark or that fire, believing in what you do, having something that's worthwhile as well, knowing that it's worthwhile, continues to provide a foundation for your efforts. That will carry you through. It may seem like days are very dark sometimes, but with your belief in what you're doing and having something worthwhile that's worth doing, then you'll be okay.
Very good points. And for someone who is not familiar with Laub Biochem, what are your services? What do you do in Newport Beach?
All Laub Biochem does is humic acid. Starting with the sourcing of the material, processing the material, testing the material. That's all that we do, humic acid.
Okay. And was it always your intention to create something that was innovative and disruptive in the health industry? I know that you didn't necessarily create humic acid. It's inherent in the earth, but you really brought its properties to light. Is that always something that you were looking to do?
Not all the time, but certainly in the early days of Laub Biochem, it was evident that humic acid really is a very good antiviral. That is, it can impact viral disease, and viral disease, as you know today, is just rampant in the world with outbreaks of Ebola and the MERS virus, norovirus, SARS, bird flu, all of these various viruses that are impacting human health. Humic acid can actually address some of those health concerns.
And during your research, what was it exactly that made you think, I'm really onto something right now?
Well, in the very early days, even before the foundation of the corporation, I and my coworkers found that, in fact, natural product humic acid was effective against AIDS. And that was very important to me from a couple standpoints. First, when I was in high school, probably 1960 or thereabouts, my older sister had a friend who was a reporter for the Berkeley Barb, a newspaper at the time. And he was gay, and he contracted what we now know as AIDS, and he died in about the mid-60s. No one really understood at that time what he died of, because AIDS had not been a recognized disease at the time. That left a very marked impression on me, knowing the fellow when he was alive and then having him later pass away. There was another incident that happened to me when I was teaching at Ohio State. I had a phone call from the wife of a soldier who'd served in Vietnam. The symptoms she described to me today we would recognize immediately as the symptoms of AIDS. But at that time, again, AIDS was unknown, had not been identified as a disease. And this poor lady was watching her husband literally waste away. She thought, and he thought as well, that it was Agent Orange. So she'd saved his boots, and she wanted me to test the boots, but I knew that wasn't going to do any good because it had been way, way too long. Agent Orange has a very short half-life.
Dr. Laub, if I can have you hold that thought. You're watching BeBelieveTV, and we have to take a short break, but stick around because after the break, we're talking about humic acid and how it can affect your health. Welcome back to BeBelieveTV. I'm Asia Celestino. We're sitting down with our guest, Dr. Richard Laub. Dr. Laub, before the break, we were talking about humic acid, but you have something to share. What is ViraSil?
Well, ViraSil is a commercial version of humic acid, and it contains 250 milligrams per tablet. It's a very effective way to introduce humic acid to the human body, and it will act as a prophylactic material, taking one tablet in the morning, one tablet at night, and you just don't get sick. You don't get colds or flus because the humic acid in ViraSil will stop those diseases. The humic acid helps the immune system to ward off, if you will, infections like that. But on a therapeutic basis, it's also effective if you weren't taking ViraSil and you were to come down with flu symptoms. 2 tablets 3 times a day for several days will limit the flu symptoms to about a day and a half to 2 days. So once you have the symptoms and you start taking ViraSil, the next day you're really sick, you have the flu. But the day after that, you're 100% better, still taking 2 tablets 3 times a day. The day after that, you're 100% back to normal. So the flu only lasts a day and a half with ViraSil taken as a therapeutic material.
So this is something that can be taken either every day or when you feel the symptoms?
Yes, you can either take it every day on a prophylactic basis and then you don't get sick to start with, or if you prefer, have it in a bottle on the shelf of your medicine cabinet, and when you feel sick or start to feel flu-y or you feel a cold coming on, then take humic acid. I prefer taking it on a prophylactic basis so I just don't get sick to start with. And I've been doing that since mid-2004 when we first started to commercialize humic acid, and no colds or flu since.
So how exactly does it work? What is the science behind it? Because it's something that comes from the earth, the soil, right?
Yes, it is essentially composted organic matter that is 50 to 100,000 years old or so. it's on the way to becoming coal in deposits underground. In fact, it's sometimes called young coal or brown coal or leonardite, all names for the same thing. The material is not yet coal, however. It's still got the properties of composted organic plant matter. The way it actually works is that it attacks viruses. Now, you have to understand that all animal viruses work the same way when they try to reproduce. Essentially, a mammalian virus has to attach to a host cell to reproduce. The virus then injects its RNA or DNA into the interior of the cell, and it tricks the cell into making more baby viruses, which then bud out through the cell wall and go on to continue the process. Viruses don't eat or sleep or speak or think. They're very, very primitive life forms. All viruses do is reproduce. But in the process of attaching to host cells and tricking the host cell into making more baby viruses, eventually that will kill the host cell. And that's where the bad part of viruses comes in. But what humic acid does is it binds to the sites on the surface of viruses that viruses use to attach to host cells. So now the virus can't attach to a host cell, meaning it can't reproduce. Well, that's very good news, because the flu virus, for example, only lives for about 36 to 48 hours if it's not allowed to reproduce. And so then the flu virus dies out. And that's why when you take ViraSil with the flu symptoms only last a day and a half to 2 days.
Okay. So
all viruses work that way. All mammalian viruses work that way. And humic acid, being effective attaching to viruses, is effective against all mammalian viruses. It's broad spectrum.
So is humic acid and ViraSil for everyone? Can anyone take it? Are there any people that shouldn't take it?
ViraSil has been extensively tested. It's absolutely safe. It has no side effects, no drug interactions. It can be taken with or without food. For children 6 to 12, I would recommend half a dose. So instead of 1 tablet twice a day, I would recommend half a tablet twice a day. For children 12 and older, a full adult dose is fine.
This is great news for everyone who doesn't want to suffer from their cold or their flu. We'll talk more after the break about how this is affecting the future of the health industry, but stick around, you're watching BeBelieveTV. Welcome back to BeBelieveTV. I'm Asia Celestino, sitting down with our guest, Dr. Richard Laub. Dr. Laub, is the testing process for humic acid, is it very hard? Are we in the clinical trials of this? Is this something that's in the market right now?
Well, the material has been commercialized since 2004, and it is available over the counter. The material is raw humic acid, after it's processed, is tested to make sure that we have the right material in the right concentration, and that it doesn't contain impurities or other harmful materials. And of course it's extensively sterilized because it does come out of the ground.
Do you think that the market for health supplements and other products like this is very competitive? Is there a way for humic acid to become more mainstream?
Well, the nutraceutical market in general is very competitive, but we're in a position at Laub BioChemicals Corporation of really being the pioneer of humic acid in the United States. There really is no other source of humic acid that offers the very extensive sourcing, processing, testing, namely all of the science behind humic acid that I've developed. And that's very important because the material does have very different physical chemical properties, for example, depending upon where you get it from. So it can be more efficacious or less efficacious, that is more effective or less effective. It also is hugely dependent on how the material is processed. What do you do to it after you've dug it out of the ground? And then finally, testing the material to make sure that it's safe, reproducible, and efficacious. All of that took me 10 years at Laub Biochem to develop. And it really wasn't until 2004 that I felt, yes, I now know enough about humic acid such that it is safe, reproducible, and efficacious to make it commercially available.
That leads me to my next question. Is there an area in the world or even in our country where the soil is most efficacious?
Oh yes, there are definitely good sources of humic acid in the United States. I've tested materials from all over the world, and the source that we use for ViraSil really is the preeminent source of humic acid. Again, it depends very much on the physical chemical properties of the material. So for example, material from New Mexico, which is a huge source of humic acid for industrial purposes, as well as West Texas, another major source of humic acid. Those materials are okay in terms of what they're used for, agriculture, petroleum industry largely, but they're not very efficacious in terms of human viral disease. In contrast, the material that ViraSil makes use of is not very good for agriculture. It's not very useful for petroleum industry, although it can be used for those applications as well. But it's very efficacious if it's processed correctly for human viral disease. And that's the focus of BeBelieve and ViraSil, is to impact human viral disease.
And one of the biggest issues in today's health economy is probably the fear of superbugs, right? And with ViraSil, it can kind of transform and not become replicated by a virus. Is there any sort of way that you're trying to prevent any type of virus or illness in the future from kind of spiraling into this snowball effect?
Well, ViraSil and the humic acid in ViraSil actually is very, very difficult for a virus to mutate, to overcome, because ViraSil binds to the binding sites on the surfaces of viruses that viruses use to attach to host cells. It doesn't interfere with any sort of intracellular mechanism or mechanisms that the virus might be trying to cause. But literally all it does is prevent viruses from binding to cell surfaces. But that's enough, because that causes the virus to be able to be overcome by the host immune system. If the virus can't replicate, that is, can't duplicate itself, then it's only going to last for one generation. You give the host immune system a huge boost by doing that, by limiting viral growth in situ. Then the host immune system can be made very much more effective in combating viral disease.
And we know that humic acid, as you're saying, it's obviously a benefit for humans, but within the human race, we have other competitors in the nutraceutical industry. Are there people that are out to get you almost because this is such an innovative product that is making strides?
No, not really. No one's out to overcome humic acid or ViraSil. Anything that benefits human health is obviously a very good thing. But it's very welcome, the development of ViraSil, because the number of medicaments for viral disease, prescription or over-the-counter, whatever it might be, is very, very limited. There are very few medicines, again, prescription or otherwise, for the flu, for example. And yet humic acid is very effective against combating and, in fact, eliminating the flu. So humic acid is a welcome development, certainly in the nutraceutical world and in the world in general, because it literally will help people overcome viral disease.
That's good to know. Only silver linings. So how can people find out more about your company, Humic Acid and ViraSil?
Well, Laub Biochem, the website is www.laubbiochem.com. There is lots of information posted there. Simply doing a browser search on VFI Humic Acid or just humic acid. Human consumption of humic acid is a good phrase to do a search on. And for ViraSil, of course, BeBelieveTV.
Dr. Laub, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for watching. This is BeBelieveTV. I'm Asia Celestino, and for more episodes, visit BeBelieveTV.com.